Hello, Nigel here. I couldn't help noticing that you're still awake. Now, I'm an owl, I'm supposed to be up at night, but you need your sleep. So if it's your allergy symptoms that are keeping you up, here's a word to the wise. Try Xyzal. You see, Xyzal works fast to relieve sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat. And it keeps going strong for 24 hours, so you can get your sleep and wake up refreshed and ready for a productive day ahead. Be wise, all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen. You just have to be intrigued by true crime documentaries on Netflix. And if that's you, welcome home. Today, I am taking you back to a case that started in the early 80s. And well, it is still going on as of this recording. But it's not going on because the investigators didn't eventually catch the perpetrator. It's going on because the perpetrator didn't take the time to get to know his victims, so he couldn't identify them. His victims were usually sex workers, runaways, or just women who were hitchhiking. This man would eventually have the audacity to tell the police he thought he was doing them a favor by getting rid of these women. But in actuality, as it would turn out, many of his victims were just young girls, and all of his victims were someone's daughter. This murderer spent his time in the military having as much sex as possible with sex workers, and then becoming enraged when he contracted a venereal disease due to not using protection. After this, he figured revenge would be his. Join me today as I bring you the tragic story of the Green River murders and the investigators who knew exactly who the perpetrator was, but they were just waiting for technology to catch up. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning: this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Warning, this case does involve discussions of rape, torture, and murder. Please listen with care. Our story begins in Kent, Washington during the summer of 1982. Kent is a bustling industrial city today near Seattle, but back in the 80s, it still had a bit of a rural feel to it. The 1980 census put its population at 23,000. The 2020 census estimated roughly 137,000 people. On July 15, 1982, two young boys were out doing what kids did back then in the summer. They were out enjoying the sunshine, riding their bikes, and exploring. On this day, they were riding near the Green River in Kent, Washington. As the two boys rode over the Meeker Street Bridge, one of them noticed something pushed up against a post in the water. A closer look revealed white sneakers poking out. The boys decided to go check it out, so they climbed down the bank of the river to get a closer look. And then they walked into the water, and that's when they saw what they thought was a jacket. As they started to get closer, one of the boys told his buddy, "Stop." They were starting to see that the denim that they thought was a jacket was wrapped around something, and beneath they could see hair moving in the current of the water. It was the body of a female. Police were notified, and soon the victim was pulled from the water and transported to the King County Medical Examiner's office. A pair of jeans and a blue and white blouse were knotted tightly around the victim's neck. Inside the front pocket of the jeans were the initials WC, and there was a single penny found in the change pocket. The body was completely nude except for socks and shoes. The ME could see a bruise on the left forearm, and a forensic x-ray determined her arm was broken in two places higher up on the upper arm. The bruise and broken bones told the story of a violent fight for her life. The cause of death was determined to be ligature strangulation that included a fractured hyoid bone and extreme hemorrhaging in the muscles of her neck. The ME determined that the young woman had died 3 days earlier on July 12, 1982. They had no way of identifying the body, so the King County ME distributed pictures of the tattoos that were on the body in hopes that they could learn the victim's identity. And they lucked out. A local tattoo artist named Joseph Yates called the Kent Police Department and said that he recognized the tattoos as his own work. He told them that the victim's name was Wendy and that she lived with her mom in Puyallup. Investigators were able to quickly determine that the victim was 16-year-old Wendy Lee Cofield. Wendy had been living with a foster family after a tumultuous childhood. When her parents divorced, she went to live with her mom while her sister lived with their dad. Living with her mom wasn't easy, though. After she was removed from her mother's care and put into foster care, Wendy started working in the sex trade on what was called the Pacific Highway South, or the PHS, in the SeaTac area. The PHS was well known as a location to find sex workers. The last time that Wendy was seen alive was when she left her foster home on the night of July 8, 1982. The ME didn't think that she died until the 12th, but no one will ever know where Wendy was during those days. Less than a month after Wendy's body was discovered, on Friday, August 12, 1982, an employee of a meatpacking plant located along the Green River in Kent stepped outside to have a smoke break along the riverbank. As he stood there, he noticed something floating in the water. It was the body of a woman. The man immediately notified the police, and eventually the body was removed from the water and brought to the King County ME's office. The victim's fingerprints were still intact, so they were taken and sent to a technician to see if she was in the system. The body also had a heart tattoo on its arm with the letters D-U-B, Dub, written inside. They got a hit on the fingerprints. The woman had been previously arrested for sex work just 30 days prior to her death. It was 23-year-old Deborah Lynn Bonner from Tacoma, and the manner of her death was homicide. They didn't know exactly when Deborah died, but they knew that she had been in the water for a very long time. Deborah, known as Dub to her family, was also a sex worker and had been seen alive on July 25, 1982, when she left the motel she was staying at to go along the PHS to, quote, catch some dates. 2 bodies in 30 days raised a lot of concerns and meant they needed their best on the case. Detective Dave Reichert would be assigned to investigate, but little did he know at the time that Deborah was going to be the second victim in what would become a string, or maybe we should call it a rope, of 4 dozen murdered women and girls that he would work to solve over the next 20 years. On August 14, 1982, just 2 days after Deborah Lynn Bonner's body was found, 2 more bodies were discovered by a man who was on the river rafting. The rafter initially thought that he saw mannequins, but realized, I'm sure to his horror, that they were human remains. The bodies were just 600 yards downstream from where Deborah's body had been recovered in the Green River. The women were Marcia Chapman, who was found submerged in the water. Her body was nude and positioned on her back. There were several large boulders placed on her to hold her down in the river. One arm had gotten free and eerily waved as the current went by. Marcia was 31 and a mother of 3 children. She was living with her kids in an apartment near the PHS and was involved in sex work as well. The last time that she had been seen was on August 1, 1982, when she left her apartment. Marcia was killed via strangulation and a rock was found inside of her vagina. The second body was 17-year-old Cynthia Hines, whose body was just a few feet away from Marcia's. Her body was also nude and held down in the river by boulders. Cynthia was also a known sex worker and frequented the PHS to find clients. Her pimp was the last person to see her alive on August 11th, when he saw her get in a black Jeep with a man. Cynthia's cause of death was strangulation, and she also had a rock placed inside of her vagina. Detective Riker arrived to process the scene. While he was working, he came across another body on the bank of the river. Can you imagine? You're processing one body and then you discover another. This victim was 16-year-old Opal Mills. Opal was laying on her stomach. Investigators could see that she had a ligature around her neck and a large bruise on her bottom. Opal had called her parents on August 12th from Angle Lake State Park that is located just off the PHS. It was the last time anyone would hear from Opal. Opal's family did not know she was involved in sex work, but her friends later told detectives that she was, in fact, working in the PHS area. 5 bodies had all been found nude and in or near the Green River since July 15th. All had been strangled to death and all were nude. Multiple victims had their clothing tied around their necks and used as ligatures. On August 16, 1982, the King County Sheriff's Office established a 40-member Green River Task Force with 31-year-old Detective Dave Riker leading the team. But the creation of the Green River Task Force wouldn't stop the Green River Killer. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns, and April is Financial Literacy Month, an entire month dedicated to taking control of your money. Because honestly, no one really taught me how to manage money growing up. I didn't learn about investing until I was well into adulthood. But what I love about Acorns is that it makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. I know, April is an entire month, but you don't need an entire month to learn. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that matches you and your goals. You can start with just your spare change. And you don't need a lot of time. Setup takes just 5 minutes because I know that your time is precious. And if financial wellness has ever felt out of reach, Acorns makes it simple, giving your money a chance to grow without the overwhelm. Personally, using Acorns gave me the confidence to stop putting it off and just start. And that peace of mind is completely worth it. Sign up now and join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $25 billion with a B dollars with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/militarymama or download the Acorns app to get started today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/militarymama.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
On September 20th, 1982, 15-year-old Deborah Estes vanished without a trace. She was last seen at approximately 3 p.m. that day near a motel on the PHS. Deborah Estes was also a known sex worker. On September 25th, 1982, the remains of a female were found laying under an apple tree in South King County. The woman had been strangled using a pair of men's socks that were still wrapped around her neck. The body was nude and positioned on its back with the legs flexed at the hip and the knees bent at a 90-degree angle. The body was identified as 19-year-old Giselle Laverne. Giselle was a known sex worker who frequently met clients while walking along the PHS. She had last been seen alive on July 17, 1982, at around 11 a.m. when she left her apartment saying that she planned on turning some tricks on the PHS and that she would return later that day. Between August of 1982 and June of 1983, the bodies of 6 more women were discovered along a twisty half-mile stretch of Star Lake Road in King County with approximately a quarter of a mile of distance between each body. The area along Star Lake Road is about 5 miles from the locations of the remains that had been found earlier. 5 of the bodies were completely nude, and 1 still had a blouse on. All 6 were strangled. All 6 were known sex workers, and 5 of them were known to work along the PHS, and the PHS was actually the last known location for those 5 victims. The 6th victim had a previous arrest for prostitution on PHS, but that was not the last place she had been seen. What interested the task force was that these women seemed to have been killed and dumped before the first set of remains. Remember, that victim was Wendy Lee Cofield. And so the task force believed that these last 6 women had been murdered before Wendy was murdered and found. It was obvious to the investigators that the same perpetrator had killed these 6 victims. They based their conclusion on a few things: the similarities of the case, like victim lifestyle, time and place of disappearance, the concentration of bodies at the dump site, the cause of death, and the condition of the bodies. Terry Milligan was 16 when she disappeared on August 29, 1982. At the time, she was living at the Moonrise Hotel on the PHS and was a sex worker. Her skeletonized remains weren't found until April 1st, 1984. Her blouse was found around her neck and upper arms. Her legs were flexed out at the knees and hips at a 90-degree angle, which led investigators to believe that she was posed deliberately. On March 3, 1983, 18-year-old Alma Ann Smith was working on the PHS with her best friend and roommate. While her roommate was gone with a client, Alma was picked up by a man in a blue pickup truck. When her roommate got back to the hotel they lived at, she was approached by a man in a blue pickup truck who tried to broker a date with her. Alma's scattered skeleton was found off Star Lake Road on April 2, 1984. The skeletal remains of the third body found at Star Lake were discovered on March 31, 1984. The victim was identified as 17-year-old Dolores Williams. Her skeleton appeared to have been deliberately covered with branches and debris, and no clothing was located with it. Dolores disappeared between March 8 and March 17, 1983. Her roommate said that she had gone out on the PHS for sex work and vanished from near the bus stop outside the same hotel that Alma Smith had disappeared from. Unfortunately, no witnesses saw the vehicle or the person that Dolores left with. 23-year-old sex worker Gail Matthews disappeared on April 10, 1983, as she was working on the PHS. Her skeletonized remains were found near Star Lake Road on September 19, 1983. The last time her boyfriend saw her, she was sitting in the passenger seat of a pickup truck in the southbound lanes of the highway. The boyfriend waved at Gail, but she must have not seen him because she didn't wave back. The boyfriend could see that a white man was driving the truck, which he recalled either being greenish or blue. A week after Gail Matthews vanished, a sex worker named Sandra Gabbert disappeared on April 17, 1983. Sandra regularly worked the same bus stop as Alma Smith and Dolores Williams. Sandra lived with her boyfriend in a motel on PHS. On the day she disappeared, she gave her boyfriend the $70 she had already earned that day and said that she was going back out for 2 more dates at the bus stop. 17-year-old Sandra's body was found almost a year later on April 1, 1984, 100 feet below Star Lake Road. The task force had brought in an expert tracker who said that Sandra's body had been concealed by a man who methodically and calmly made trips back and forth from a brush pile to get materials to hide her body. The tracker said that the man made no wasted movements and showed no signs of panic, which just makes this case even creepier. The last victim found at Star Lake was Carrie Roes, who disappeared sometime between May 31st and June 15, 1983. There were no witnesses, so the circumstances were not known exactly when she went missing. Carrie was also a known sex worker known to look for clients in the area by the bus stop, where 2 other victims had been picked up. Carrie was only 15. Her remains were found on March 10, 1985, in a swampy area 15 yards downhill from Star Lake Road, and only 25 yards from where Sandra's remains had been found the year prior. On April 30, 1983, 18-year-old Marie Malver set out on the PHS to find sex work. Her boyfriend watched her get into a dark-colored pickup with a single white male inside. The boyfriend followed the truck going south until it suddenly flipped around in a parking lot and headed north, then turned east. The boyfriend lost sight of the truck at that point. 3 days later, on May 3rd, Marie's boyfriend reported Marie as missing, but lied and said that the last time he saw her was at their place and that she was going to use a payphone on the PHS. The very next day, he called the police and told them that he had lied. He actually told them the truth, said that Marie was a sex worker and had been picked up by a trick that he described as a man in his early 40s, possibly Mexican or Indian. When Marie's dad learned about her disappearance, he told the boyfriend that since he was the last one to see her, he'd better go find her. The boyfriend must have been scared, and he drove around neighborhoods near the PHS looking for the pickup truck he had last seen Marie drive away in. And can you believe it? He found the truck parked at a house on 32nd Place South. The boyfriend called it in to the local PD, which was in the city of Des Moines, Washington, of course, because we haven't teleported to Iowa yet. or at all in this case. 2 detectives went to the residence that day and contacted the owner who was inside the house. The owner was identified as Gary Leon Ridgeway. Ridgeway actually knew one of the detectives because they had gone to school together. He told the detectives that he had been arrested a while back for picking up sex workers before, but denied knowing anything about some young girl named Marie and her disappearance. Ridgeway stood next to the fence while the detectives talked to him, purposefully hiding his forearm from them. He was hiding it because there were deep scratches on his arm. Later, Ridgeway used battery acid to conceal the scratch marks after the police were gone, and this acid left very distinct scars on this man. By the way, during the first few murders, the Green River serial killer, as this man would later be known, would use his hands to strangle his victims, but he quickly noticed that his arms got all types of scratched up as the victims attempted to save themselves. So he later switched to using ligatures to avoid injury to his arms. And listen, the fact that Marie's boyfriend found this man is insanity. But even crazier is the fact that when the police visited Gary Ridgway's home, Marie was inside the house. But the investigators had nothing to go on, so they didn't go in. After that call, Marie was listed as a missing person. But without any concrete evidence to tie Ridgeway to Marie's disappearance or any of the bodies found so far, the police put his name on the list of suspects. Now, I want to stop right here. I wonder if an astute cop could have ginned up a good search affidavit to search Ridgeway's house on this day. Also, did he admit he picked her up and then dropped her off somewhere? Was Marie's boyfriend credible? Probably not, because he initially lied about how she disappeared or when was the last time he saw her. Sadly, had Ridgeway been caught on this date, dozens of women's lives would have been saved. A few weeks later, on May 27, 1983, Marie's driver's license was found on the floor at the airport, leading people to believe that she had just voluntarily moved away. There were rumors that she was in Hollywood or maybe Hawaii, but these were all just rumors. Time kept creeping by with no solid tips about what actually happened to Marie.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
While the search for Marie was underway, on May 8, 1983, another body was found in a wooded grove in Maple Valley. The body was dressed and her body had been posed on its back with 2 trout, like fish, placed on her chest. An empty wine bottle laid across her stomach and a sausage was on her hands. The woman had been strangled with a ligature and semen was collected from her body. The body was identified as 21-year-old Carol Christensen. 5 days earlier, she had left her job as a waitress at the Barn Door Tavern in SeaTac, but was expected back at work later that day. Carol never returned. Carol was not a known sex worker, but she did hitchhike frequently. In late October 1983, near the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, 2 bike riders came across a body buried in a shallow grave. Police decided they'd better do an extensive search considering the number of women and girls who had gone missing and the number of bodies found in the last year. The police used cadaver dogs and volunteer searchers to methodically perform a grid search of the area surrounding the body, which was a vacant plot of land. And within 2 days, they sadly found what they suspected they would: another body. they believed they had found another dump site of the Green River Killer. In all, there would be 4 bodies recovered at this site, but the 4th wouldn't be recovered until 1986, 3 years after the first 3 bodies were located. All 4 bodies had been strangled and their nude bodies were concealed in shallow graves and covered. All 4 were known sex workers. The first victim was 18-year-old Mary Meehan. Sadly, Mary was 7 months pregnant, so when she died, her unborn baby was killed as well. According to her boyfriend, she didn't have a huge pregnancy belly, so it probably went unnoticed. Mary disappeared on September 15, 1982. She had been living in a motel on the PHS where she engaged in sex work. Constance Connie Naone left to go to her job at a sausage factory. After her shift, she returned home to her apartment that she shared with her boyfriend and told him she was going out to buy drugs. Connie, sadly, had a cocaine habit, and she funded it by doing sex work on the side. She was known to go to the PHS, park by the Red Lion, and then find clients by going car to car trying to solicit the drivers. When she earned enough cash to pay for her drug habit, then she would stop for the night. That night, June 8, 1983, Connie never made it back to her apartment. Her remains wouldn't be found for another 4 months when they were discovered by some bicycle riders partially buried in a shallow grave. Her clothing and jewelry were missing, and there was a small rock found in her pelvic region. It was reminiscent of the rocks that had been found in the pelvic area of 2 of the victims found in the Green River. On July 18, 1983, 22-year-old Kelly Ware called her parents for the last time. She had been working in the sex trade for a few years and, like all the others, vanished into thin air. Her remains were located in the vacant lot in late October 1983, but were unidentified until the following year. Kelly's sister reported her as a missing person about a month after her remains were identified. The last victim found in the vacant lot was actually the second victim that had been killed out of the 4, and that was 19-year-old Andrea Childers. Her remains were the ones that were found in 1986. Andrea had been last seen at a bus stop, not on the PHS, with plans to go to the South Center Mall. She had been arrested for sex work a month prior by Seattle PD, but as far as anyone knew, she was not seeking clients on the last day she was seen, which was April 14, 1983. Andrea's remains were found face down with their legs splayed out wide. She had been covered by a car fender and a wooden tabletop that protected her body from the elements and left her more intact than some of the other bodies in the lot that were found years earlier. In May 1984, a man called the Green River Task Force and said that he had some information about their case. The man was Gary Ridgeway. The police brought Ridgeway in and questioned him again, but this time they administered a polygraph test. Ridgeway passed the polygraph and denied killing any women or having anything to do with any of the missing women. And apparently, the information that he provided to the investigators led nowhere. With that, Ridgeway walked out without incident. In December of 1984, a sex worker named Rebecca reported to the Green River Task Force that she had been violently assaulted back in November of 1982. She said that she was hitchhiking on the PHS when a man came up in a truck and offered to give her a ride. She asked the driver if he was the Green River Killer, and he said, "No, of course not." And he even showed his ID from work at the Kenworth Trucking Company. The man seemed very meek and unassuming, so Rebecca got into the truck. Along the route, she offered him a date, $20 for oral sex, and the man accepted. Rebecca told the man to drive to a secluded area just off the PHS, and when they got to the secluded area, the man told Rebecca that he wanted to go into the woods. She agreed, and off they went. The man dropped his shorts, and Rebecca knelt and began to perform oral sex on the man. However, the man could not get an erection and suddenly accused Rebecca of biting him. He shoved her down onto the ground, pushing her face into the dirt, and wrapped his arm around her neck in what she called a police-style chokehold. Rebecca struggled and fought with all she had, telling the man that all she had was her family and that she didn't want to die. Rebecca heroically broke free from his grasp and ran to the nearest house to get help with the man hot on her heels. The man thankfully gave up and Rebecca made it to the house. The occupants listened as Rebecca told them how she had been attacked by the man. Her blouse was torn and she had visible abrasions on her neck. She was terrified and was sure that this man had just tried to kill her. Because she had traded sex for money with the man, Rebecca initially hesitated to report the assault. But over the following 2 years, with all the publicity about the Green River Killer and the task force trying to find any leads, Rebecca decided to report what had happened. And it was reported on Catching Killers, a Netflix show, that at the time that Rebecca reported this, the task force had put together a, quote, "someone out there knows something" campaign, end quote, where they were offering up to a $28,000 reward to catch the man dubbed the Green River Killer. Now that's roughly a reward of $85,000 today. Rebecca told the task force that the man was white, between 30 and 35 years old. He had light brown hair and she thought he might have had a mustache. He had been wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes, even though it was November and cold outside. She remembered his vehicle as a 1980 burgundy or maroon pickup truck with a white canopy. She also told the investigators that she saw the man's ID card from the Kenworth Trucking Company. Detectives used this information to seek out a suspect, and they looked at all the arrestees who had been arrested for solicitation, and they quickly found Gary Ridgeway had been arrested for solicitation, and he was a truck painter at Kenworth. What are the odds? The task force presented Rebecca with a photo lineup of 6 men, and she immediately zeroed in on Ridgway's picture. In February of 1985, a detective from the task force contacted Ridgway and asked him about Rebecca's accusations of the assault. Ridgway admitted that he had dated Rebecca and had actually choked her, but that it was a reflex because she bit his penis. Ultimately, Rebecca chose not to press charges, and Ridgway continued to be a free man. In late 1985, human remains were located 3 hours south of Seattle in Tigard, Oregon, a suburb of Portland. A construction crew found a skull and notified the police. The skull would later be identified as belonging to 22-year-old Denise Bush, who had disappeared from the PHS in Seattle back on October 8, 1982, where she had been living and working as a sex worker. More remains belonging to Denise were found in 1990 in Tukwila, which is outside of Seattle. The bottom part of her jaw was located that included a shunt that had been placed a few months before she went missing. This meant that she was already pretty decomposed when she was moved. A few days after Denise's skull was found in 1985, more human remains were located in Tigard that were later identified as 18-year-old Shirley Sherrill. Shirley was a sex worker from Seattle that was known to work the PHS Strip. She had last been seen between October 20th and October 22nd, 1982 in Seattle's International District. In August of 1983, another victim was located north of the Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The body was found near a water tower in a shallow grave under an apple tree. It turned out to be 17-year-old Shonda Summers. She had last been seen during the first week of October of 82. Her stepfather filed a missing persons report within a couple of weeks of her disappearance. Shonda's mother traveled to Seattle from California to search for her daughter, but they were not able to locate her. Then, on March 21, 1984, a baseball field caretaker's dog brought home something that you'd think only happens in the movies. He had a human leg bone in his mouth and brought it home to his owner. The caretaker called police and a search of the woods near the field was conducted. Over the course of a few days, the police recovered skeletal remains of a young woman. However, they were unable to identify her, and she was dubbed Jane Doe Bones 10. She was believed to be a small-statured, left-handed Caucasian female who was roughly 15 years old. During the search for Jane Doe Bravo 10, a third victim was recovered. Cheryl Wims had disappeared from central Seattle near Judkins Playground. Her friends said that she had been involved in sex work and that she would frequently hitchhike. They said Cheryl wasn't very particular about who she took rides from either. Cheryl was killed on her 18th birthday on May 23, 1983. Her remains weren't located until a year later, when Jane Doe Bravo 10 was found. Cheryl's skeleton was located a few hundred feet from Jane Doe 10 and about half a mile from where Shonda Summers' remains were. All three of the women's bodies found in this area were nude, and their causes of death were listed as unspecified homicidal violence. These are not all of the victims. The remainder I will discuss in part 2.
We off?
30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
By 1986, the Green River Task Force was still without any definitive leads as to who this prolific killer was. Detective Reichert was still leading the charge 5 years after the task force had been established. In a really weird twist, the detective received a letter in the mail from an infamous serial killer, Ted freaking Bundy. Yep, Ted Bundy sent Detective Reichert a letter, and in it, he offered his help in finding the Green River Killer. After all, he had some experience in this arena. Without any other leads, Detective Reichert hopped on a plane to Florida to talk to Bundy in person. Over the course of several interviews, Bundy told the detectives that he thought that the killer might be revisiting the corpses and having sex with them. It was certainly eye-opening information, but it didn't shed any additional light on the actual perpetrator behind the Green River murders. Meanwhile, the task force was being painted in a negative light by the Seattle media, who were saying that they were spending a lot of tax dollars and not catching the murderer. We're talking about millions of dollars and thousands of hours of work done by law enforcement. But the body count kept going up and the search area kept expanding despite their efforts. There was a political cartoon that came out around this time that referred to the task force as a task farce. In 1987, the task force had one man at the top of their suspect list, but nothing directly tying him to the murders. They continued to grind and dig in on Gary Ridgeway, and eventually they were able to obtain Ridgeway's credit card receipts. They found that he had purchased a lot more gas than normal in the weeks that the victims had disappeared. But because they were unable to pinpoint the women's exact date or time of death, they couldn't directly attach the gas purchases to the victims. So, I just mentioned that Gary Ridgeway was their main suspect. So, who exactly was this guy? We know that he was a truck painter at Kenworth Trucking, but what else did we know about him? Well, Ridgeway grew up in the SeaTac area near the airport, and he still lived in that area. Ridgeway's childhood was fairly normal, but due to childhood bedwetting that went well into his teen years, his mom would humiliate him by washing his genitals in front of his brothers. It's unclear if it was the fact that his mom was still washing his privates into his adolescent years or something else, but Ridgeway would develop a gross sexual attraction to his mother, and he even fantasized about killing her because of this attraction. When Ridgeway was 15 or 16 years old, he tentatively explored killing people. And I say tentatively because he wasn't successful. So he came across a first grader playing in the woods between his house and school. Ridgeway asked the little boy if he wanted to build a fort with him, and the boy said sure. But then the teenage Ridgeway pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed the boy in the chest, lacerating his liver. Ridgeway ran away and left the boy for dead. The little boy was eventually found and he did survive, but it took him weeks to recover and he wasn't able to shed any light on the perpetrator. So Ridgeway walked free. The little boy would later go on to be homeschooled and never return to his old school again. Eventually, the memory of the attack was too much and the young boy's family moved to California. So, more on Ridgeway. Ridgeway had a very low IQ, testing somewhere around 80. He struggled to complete high school, but eventually did graduate. Once he graduated, he was drafted into the Navy and shipped out. He was married while he was in the Navy, but divorced after he found out his wife had cheated on him. But he also had cheated on her, because while he was in the Navy and still married, Ridgeway frequented many sex workers wherever he was located. And eventually, he got gonorrhea. This made him very angry, and he would eventually use this as a point as to why he wanted to kill as many sex workers as possible. But the Navy didn't know about this, nor would they have cared, and Ridgeway was honorably discharged in 1971. After he got out of the Navy, he started working as a truck painter for Kenworth Trucking. He was meticulous about his work, and he actually received awards for his perfect attendance. Ridgway's son was born after he married his second wife, but they split up in 1981. According to his second wife, he liked to sneak up behind her in the woods and choke her. Which, listen, I have so many questions. First of all, why were they out in the woods so much? Like, were they hiking or what? Anyway, Ridgeway met his third wife in 1985 at a Parents Without Partners meeting. Ridgway's third wife would describe him as quiet and polite. She said he never got angry, was non-threatening, meek, and was small in stature. Ridgeway was rather ordinary on the outside. Actually, when I saw video footage of him, this guy kind of reminds me of Rick Moranis, the dad from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I mean, he doesn't look like him, but he has the same demeanor and stature. Okay, so that's all I'll say about Gary Ridgway for now. Let's get back to the investigation. The Green River/Star Lake murders began in 1982. By 1984, Gary Ridgway was on the police's radar, and eventually they had enough evidence to get a search warrant of Ridgway's house, and they were able to get a DNA swab. Unfortunately, the search of his house didn't reveal any connection between Ridgway and the string of murders, and the DNA wasn't useful during that time either. Investigators just had to wait for technology to catch up, I guess. But for now, while the investigators felt like failures, they would later learn that their work in obtaining DNA during the investigation would pay off much, much later. Despite the Green River Task Force's efforts, which included using female vice officers going undercover as sex workers, they were getting no closer to finding the man responsible for all the murders. In 1989, 7 years after the murders began, the 40-member Green River Task Force was disbanded by King County Executive Tim Hill, but the case with all the unsolved murders was left open. And at the turn of the century, they would catch their man. Next time on Military Murder. I hate multi-parters as much as the next person, but I did want to spend as much time as possible talking about the victims in the case. And I'm not even done talking about all of them, because as we would later learn, there were dozens of murders linked to the same killer. I want to say thank you all for listening, and be sure to tune in next week to listen to part 2. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to rate this show 5 stars wherever you're listening. This truly does help me reach new listeners. And if you're interested in more content, consider supporting the show. I have over 50 full-length bonus episodes, and you can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/militarymurder to learn more about bonus episodes. Shout out to Myrtle for researching and writing this episode for me. My sources for this episode include a Netflix show called Catching Killers, a documentary called Green River: Mind of a Monster, an episode of Cold Justice, and court documents obtained through the Seattle Times, and news articles from the Seattle Times, the Seattle PI, the Death Penalty Information Center, and the King County, Washington website. Military Murder was created by Mama Margot Productions. The music was created by Ty-Ops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you part 2 of this episode next week.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.